Good evening, everyone, and welcome. I'm Clarissa Bello, founder and CEO of Bellas Foundation and a proud member of the Latina Track Committee. And it's an honor to serve you as your moderator for today's powerful conversation in celebration of National Women's History Month. This month, we don't just reflect on history, we actively spotlight the stories of strength of women who lead with purpose, women who have navigated challenges with courage, women who have advocated not only for themselves, but for their communities, women who lift up others as they rise. Today, we are joined by an incredible panel of Latina leaders whose journey embody resilience, intention, and impact. Their paths have not been without obstacles, but through strategy, persistence, and an unwavering commitment to growth, they have transformed barriers into breakthroughs. This conversation is about more than an inspiration. It's about actionable insight. It's about learning how to navigate leadership with authenticity, how to run setbacks into stepping stones, and how to build a legacy rooted in purpose. Our panelists will share real strategies, honest lessons, and practical tools that you can apply directly to your own journey. Because leadership is not only a title, it's a decision. Growth is not accidental, it's intentional. And impact does not happen alone. It happens in community. So, whether you are at the beginning of your journey or stepping into your next chapter, I invite you to learn in, take notes, and engage fully. As we recognize National Women's History Month, we are bringing together leaders who don't just honor the legacy of women's contribution, but actively expand that legacy through their work and influence. Each of our panelists leads with intention, centering community, and meaningful impact in their work. Without further ado, it is my pleasure to introduce today's speakers. First, Dr. Lori Marie Huertas. Dr. Huertas is an award-winning educator and people and culture leader at Metropolitan State University of Denver, where she has served as Assistant Director of Inclusive Industry Partnerships. With a doctorate in organizational leadership, she focuses on workforce development, first-generation student success, and building equitable pathways between higher education and industry. She is also an author, speaker, and mentor, passionate about uplifting underrepresented voices and leading with purpose. Building on that commitment to creating pathways and empowering people, our next panelist brings a dynamic perspective on how culture shapes performance and possibility. Adriana Baccaro. Adriana is an award-winning entrepreneur, organizational culture strategist, and best-selling author with over 15 years of experience in human resources and process improvement. As founder and CEO of Culture Redesign, she partners with organizations to align culture and strategy, fostering belonging, collaboration, and measurable impact. Originating from Bogota, Colombia, she brings a global perspective and a deep commitment to creating workplaces where humanity and performance thrive together. And continuing the conversation around purpose-driven leadership and systemic impact, we are honored to welcome Lorena Wade. Lorena is a founder and principal consultant of LW Advisory Group, where she partners with healthcare organizations and executive teams to lead enterprise transformation, operational turnarounds, and sustainable growth initiatives. A former vice president of operations overseeing multi-state healthcare divisions, she blends operational discipline with human-centered leadership, She is also a leadership development coach and doctoral candidate at Pepperdine University, researching workforce sustainability, clinician burnout, and equitable access to care. As a Latina leader and scholar practitioner, her work is both strategic and deeply personal. Please join me in warmly welcoming Dr. Lori Marie Huertas, Adriana Vaccaro, and Lorena Wade. Ladies, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having us.
Qué excitement. It is, I was reading your bios and there's just, I'm just thankful to God, to Prospanica Latina Track National, because your professional trajectory is just incredible. And what an honor to be amongst you tonight.
The honor is all ours. Thank you for having us.
Likewise.
Sí, gracias. Como decimos las latinas. Entonces, vamos a comenzar. Now, National Women's History Month is a time to celebrate the achievements and contribution of women across generation. What's one pivotal moment in your career that changed your trajectory, and what did you learn from it? Please, I'll open up the floor since Dr. Lori is at my top.
Yeah, so I was talking with my colleagues here before the conversation because I'm super proud of Lorena Wade. She's working on her doctorate, and I guess a pivotal moment for me was as I was pursuing my doctoral studies, and I was working full time in higher ed. My mom was diagnosed with cancer. And then my dad was like, look, what's it going to take for you to move home? So I had to quickly pivot and moved in to help him with my mom. And within 2 weeks, he was diagnosed as well. And so both of them had cancer. My mom was getting radiation. My dad was getting chemo. My mom passed away pretty quickly. And my dad lived, they said he had 4 weeks to live. They were so in love. And I know this is not a love podcast, so we'll have to do that later. But he was so ready to be with her. They were married for 50 years. They have a beautiful love story. But he lived a year more without chemo because I dropped out of school, quit my job, took care of my papa until the end. And he's first generation, never went to school. And before he passed away, he grabbed my hand and he was like, promise me you're going to finish. So just recently completed it. What I learned from that is that family is really important. And what even as Latinas, as we set our goals, it's okay to put our goals on pause because family is important. And I had so many people telling me to put my dad in like a home. There was like a hospice home. And I was like, absolutely not. This is my dad. And at one point I was like, if I never finish my doctorate, I don't even care because, these memories and, I'm from Puerto Rico. So Bad Bunny, Debí tirar más foto, that song is very personal to me because I wanted to create those memories. So that would be my pivotal moment, and my advice would be for the listeners is that it's okay to put your goals on hold because what's meant to be is going to work out, and it just makes your story stronger, and it makes us stronger as como mujeres Latina.
I love that story, Dr. Lori. I relate. I also lost my dad to cancer. And my pivotal moment is also related to family. It was leaving my corporate job. I had a big job as a vice president of human resources. Um, you think you've arrived. And when I decided to start my entrepreneurial career, that skill set, even though some of it relates, you have to kind of reinvent yourself. But the motivation behind that was to spend more time with my kids as well. Because, they were daycare from 9 to 5 and I had to travel. So I don't regret it, but is that level of unfamiliar, like you think you know what you're doing and now you have to start learning again. So never too late, never too old, never too young. Just make the decision and commit. And how about Lorena?
Thank you so much, Dr. Lori and Adriana, for sharing your beautiful stories and journeys. For me, it was changing career trajectories. And so I was at my alma mater, Pepperdine University, bio pre-med major, thinking that I would be a pediatrician since I was very young and that that's how I would help people. And pivoting to after getting my undergrad degree and going towards and getting my MBA and knowing that, hey, I can still serve and help people, but from a leadership administrative standpoint. And so I went back to my alma mater, went and got my MBA, and it really helped me just gain that strong like business acumen to think more strategically and prepared me really for a lot of those like leadership opportunities that then came my way thereafter. And really setting that like strong foundation that I needed like once my trajectory like really changed and then opened that door for me for faster growth.
I'm in odd. I'm sorry. I cannot say it any further. Your story, Dr. Laurie, is so impactful. So is yours, Adriana and Lorena. I could totally attest to that as well. And when I was reading your bio, I said, "Oh my God, she's gonna become a doctor too." So my mom and I worked in healthcare for quite some time, for 7 years. So yes, congratulations. And I'm so sorry to hear that, but the good part of it all is that yes, we do grow from it and we need this in order to continue to move forward. And family as Latinas is the first thing that it's our first priority. So there's nothing wrong with that. Thank you for sharing, putting our life in hold to do what really focuses to what really matters. Dr. Huertas, you've dedicated much of your career to workforce development and first generation student success. What inspired you to focus on creating equitable pathways between higher education and industry?
My inspiration really comes from what I always tell people, witnessing a brilliance gap. In español, I would translate it to la discrepancia de la genialidad. The space between a student's academic capability and the access that they have to high level professional networks. Even thinking of our female Latinas. And, during my doctoral work, what I saw is that my dissertation was on first generation Hispanic students, women in STEM. And I noticed that there is such a need to develop highly sophisticated levels of critical thinking. But it's challenging because even with the question you asked earlier and what my amazing colleagues shared, like we're so like navigating two cultures. So we're navigating dual cultures, complex systems. I remember one of the questions that I asked my students during my dissertation was what is a challenge that they had? And they were saying how when they were in class, in an engineering class, that they would raise their hand to ask a question. And they were like, I don't know if the professor's not picking me because I'm Latina or if because I'm a woman, because all of my professors are white men. When we get put in groups, none of the guys want me to be in the groups or they want me to take notes. And I'm like, you take notes. And so just thinking about how industry pathways are often sometimes even built on who you know rather than the raw talent and the persistence that as women we possess. Even in the previous question, you could see how strong like my colleagues are and how much we navigate like family and work and our culture. And so I really feel like I realized that if we are not intentional, and you said that in the beginning, I really love that. If we're not intentional on building bridges, basically like what we're essentially asking our students is to build roads that while they're trying to drive on it, but we're not necessarily giving them the resources. And here at MSU Denver Metropolitan State University, we view workforce development as not just an add-on, but a matter of social justice. And we just really want to ensure that students recognize the assets that they truly are.
Wow. I could not agree more with you. And that's what we do as well here at Prospanica and also at Bellas Foundation to expose the Latino students to people that look like them so that they can feel inspired and open doors ultimately. In your experience, what are some of the biggest barriers that underrepresented students faced when entering professional spaces, and how can organizations and leaders address them?
And I feel bad because I want my colleagues to answer too. But I think that through my research, I've identified a couple of barriers that I feel really require systemic shifts. And one of them is hidden curriculum of our industry. So I feel like many of our first generation students, they're the first in their families trying to figure out how to navigate working, being in school, and there's just so many unwritten rules of networking, even regarding salary negotiation. I have that conversation all the time with my students, like when they're so excited that they get a job and they tell me what they were offered, and they don't even negotiate, they just take it. And I'm like, you don't have to accept minimum wage, like you can negotiate that. And I think even as females, I don't know. I remember that was someone in my family used to say, calladita te ve más bonita. And the older I get, I used to hate that so much, in that, like, we just kind of had to stay quiet, look pretty, and aren't like not say anything, because if we said anything, we're going to come across as bossy or aggressive. And so I think knowing that it's okay to have a voice, and understanding what I would call, and I think of Lorena with her MBA, like I would call it like corporate self-advocacy, just that like willingness to speak up. And so I do think that organizations need to move from mentorship, giving advice, to sponsorship, which is using the power to advocate for students behind closed doors. I try to do that a lot for my students. And now after meeting all of you, I'll do that for everyone on this call, because I think you guys are amazing. And just, really demystifying career ladders rather than expecting students to figure it out on their own.
And I thank you so much for sharing that. And students right now find it harder, right? No, I can add that before, I'm sure that we are probably the same age here. So back in the days, I'm not gonna mention so many years back, that we could probably relate to this, but now it has totally changed. Organizations like Prospanica and many others are really doing the work, because when I was in college or in school, I wasn't able to have anything like this. However, I was very proactive in my career. I'm not gonna lie, I was, but not everyone had the opportunity to do that. Adriana, I want to ask you one question. I know that you have such an incredible background in being a strategist and entrepreneur. As a culture strategist and entrepreneur, you have helped organizations on the other side, right? Align culture with strategy. How can leaders intentionally create spaces that prioritize both people and performance? No, I know that Dr. Lori had mentioned a little bit about the back end, and now you're going to help us with the point.
Thank you for that question. It's a perfect question after Dr. Lori's explanation, but I think the shift is not seeing humanity and performance as competing priorities. They are deeply interconnected and part of the same system. When people feel valued, psychologically safe, included, they're more likely to take ownership, they're more likely to contribute, to go the extra mile, to challenge the status quo. On the other hand, when humanity is lacking, when people feel overlooked or discriminated or unclear, or even, when there are too many clicks and then we don't know if we belong, you start to see disengagement, hesitation, and breakdowns in accountability. And that directly impacts performance. So the goal is not really to choose between caring for people or caring for performance. It's about creating the conditions where you can have both people that feel good about what they're doing and organizations that achieve those exceptional results because people feel good there. And at the end of the day, performance isn't driven by systems alone. Years ago, I was obsessed with Six Sigma and statistical analysis and technology, and all of that is great. Even everything, all the technology we have now, all of that is great. But if your people don't feel like they want to be there, you can have the best processes and all the statistical controls, and then all you have is a revolving door of people that come in, get trained, and leave. Come in, get trained, and leave. So it's all connected.
Thank you for sharing that. That's so important. The revolving doors just makes it a little bit funny. But in your book, let's talk about your book now, Culture. Now I want to read it. Where can I find it, by the way? But anyway, this is not to be told me.
Thank you.
This is off the script. Yeah. In your book, you discuss tools to empower humanity and organizations. Can you share one actionable strategy that women leaders can apply to that?
Yes, I love the question because there are 6 capabilities on the book, and all of them are statistically validated. But there is one of them that I feel like is so impactful, and is values awareness. And I'm not only talking about knowing the values of a company, but you first have to know your values as a person, your core values, and then we need to understand and also help others understand that sometimes we need to know the difference between unaligned and unfamiliar. If you're asking me to do something that is unaligned with my values, that's not going to feel good for me. But sometimes there is unfamiliarity, and it triggers the same part of the brain. It triggers your amygdala. But for this conversation as Latinas, maybe if I have a 50-year-old white male engineer reporting to me, I look and sound unfamiliar. It doesn't mean that we are not aligned. We might have the same values and we might want the same, but we need to get comfortable with unfamiliarity. And that's something that I think will really transform a workplace when we understand that as long as there is value alignment, we don't have to look or think or sound the same.
Yeah, that's very important. And I think that it helps when we know our self-confidence, we know our principles and our values. It's so much easier, the self-esteem and operating as ourselves with the talents and gifts that God provided us. It's just untapped. No, and no one can tap it down.
Yes.
And that's something that we teach at Bellas Foundation. We totally try to ensure that women know their self-worth. And this is from middle school all the way up to professionals, because it's important that they operate as they're within their gifts and talents, so that when they go into corporate America and start working in a field that they're probably number 1 or 2 within the whole company, it can be a little bit intimidating. So it's like we tend to kind of look at others, right? And before looking at ourselves and what we bring into the table. So understanding who we are, what we bring to the table is so much easier, so that we can continue to move forward and operating in our own confidence and self-worth. Thank you for sharing that. That is amazing. Now I want to read your book. Now, Lorena, I know that you've led multiple state healthcare divisions, and that's quite impressive, by the way. And serving nearly 90,000 patients annually. What did that level of responsibility teach you about resilience and decision making as a woman in executive leadership? Please share.
Yeah, that's a great question. So leading at that scale taught me quite a number of things. But as it relates to resilience in specific, I would say that it taught me that being resilient doesn't mean being like rigid or being tough. It really is about being steady. It's about when you're entrusted, like as a leader at whichever scale it is, there are lives that you're being entrusted with, whether it's the teams that you lead or the patients and the families that you serve. And it's so important that you stay grounded and consistent, especially under pressure. For me, I can tell you that there was so much pressure, especially around the time when like COVID first hit, right? And through that time, it was imperative that like every metric that I remembered, it represented people. So behind like every single number that I was responsible for, there was a human story that was attached to it. And that shaped the way that I made decisions. And then when you're looking at it and kind of like expanding back as a woman in senior leadership, as an executive, I learned that you have to lead with both conviction and humility at the end of the day. You won't always have it. We don't live in like the perfect world, right? You're not always going to have all of the information that you need or the perfect amount of information, but you need to have enough information, right, to then make thoughtful, like data-driven decisions. And then you need to own it and know that it's okay that you can adjust and pivot like if you need to. But I learned to not confuse like urgency with clarity.
That is amazing. That is actually one of the things that we need to learn, right? It's like when someone calls you and says, I need this now. I'm like, no, 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 no. Like, let's pause, right? I think that's so important, especially in that industry, no? Clarity and what's really urgent. I worked for a surgeon and he said, if a patient is not dying at my table, it's not urgency. Thank you for sharing that. Now, I understand that your work blends operational discipline with human-centered leadership. How can healthcare organizations balance performance metrics with compassion and work sustainability?
You know, I will have to say that Adriana, you answered my question earlier, with regards to like making sure that those compassion and work performance are not competing priorities, right? And that they are so integrated, and it's so important that we keep compassion, that we keep empathy, that we keep vulnerability as leaders like top of mind as we're making these very important decisions on a day-to-day that impact thousands and thousands of people, and that we're not seeing operational excellence as something that does not integrate compassion, as something, especially when we're looking at workforce sustainability, right? When we're, especially in healthcare, when our workforce already is in just so much undue stress, right? Even before COVID and then after COVID, it's a whole nother playing field with regards to the amount of pressure that our people, our internal stakeholders, that they're in to ensure that they're providing the best customer patient experience, and then also high quality care at the end of the day in addition to that. And so making sure that us as leaders, that when we're looking at the way that we lead, that we're doing it through vulnerability, through compassion, and that it's not looking at that like, oh, if I'm leading from a place of compassion or vulnerability, that I'm lowering my standards as a leader. Like that's not it at all. But actually what we're doing is we're building stronger teams that can then ensure that there's more consistent high quality care at the end of the day. And so it's about leading in a way where we can truly support our people, so that they can actually like go far above and beyond our expectations.
Yes, Dr. Lori, would you like to add to that? And also, Adriana, please share.
Again, I feel like Lorena, like you touched on so many important like aspects. I love the whole concept of empathetic leadership in that by being empathetic, even as Latina leaders, it doesn't make us weak. You know, on the contrary, like there's so much strength. And I think about, so I teach psychology part time, and I reference a lot the movie Inside Out. And I don't know if people have seen it. And obviously, I love the movie Coco too. But and both of them make me cry. But I think about an Inside Out if you've seen the movie, and it talks about the feelings and you can see inside the little girl's brain. And at the end, she's really struggling because her parents moved and she left her friends behind and she runs away. And when the parents finally connect with her, in the brain, you think that the main feeling that all of us need to have is joy. I thought joy is like okay, I need to strive to be happy all the time. But honestly, it is not until joy and sadness come together, and they do such a beautiful job in the movie because they even blend colors, that she is able to cry and then connect with the parents and then laugh, and they're able to communicate. So I do think that being empathetic, being compassionate, not being afraid to share our feelings is just really important.
Yeah, I think that we as women bring that into wherever we are. And I think that's what makes us best leaders within our organizations. Because we have that, my God, I'm lacking off the words right now. That mother nurture, right? In our spirit, because that's who we are, mother nurture, no? Nurturing and caring for anyone. And thank you for sharing that. That is so true. And I haven't seen that movie, so I have to take a look at it. But Adriana, please share.
I just wanted to bring back one of the points Lorena made about healthcare and compassion. And I think I remember vividly when my dad was getting care, there was one particular hospital where we experienced the values they had on the wall: compassion, respect, accountability. I felt it, he felt it. The whole experience is on my book. Like they will forever have my gratitude. And unfortunately, we also experienced a different place where they had values on the wall, but the experience didn't match. So I think in healthcare, to provide that experience, we really need to combine empathy and compassion with high standards.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If I can chime in, like just to kind of like close that loop, like I 1000% agree. Like it all goes back to leadership practices, right? And then how it just bubbles down to how the workforce, how our teams are, how they feel, how they perform, if they feel valued, if they feel like they're being poured into, and whether then they are engaged or not. I'm looking at my doctoral research at how leadership practices impact clinician turnover, clinician burnout, specifically in outpatient pediatric settings for neurodivergent children. As the mama of two neurodivergent toddlers, like I can relate being on the receiving end of that spectrum, but then also on the other end of the spectrum as a healthcare leader and wanting to ensure that that no families feel like how I have felt like through the journeys of like my very young daughters. And so yeah, it's so imperative that like each of us, it starts with each of us and what we role model, and making sure that those values don't just stay on the wall, but it's something that we practice, it's something that we breathe.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I think that in these days now, especially being more compassionate towards each other, it's just a better way for a better culture, no, a job, a culture and a corporation, but ultimately in the world, no? We have some questions that are on the chat, on the live. So hello, everyone. There's three so far. The first one is for those in the audience who are aspiring leaders, what is a one mindset shift or decision that made the biggest difference in your career and trajectory?
I'll go if that's okay. I'm sorry, guys. I was trying to find the hand. Um, I guess for me is we talk about there's a book called Failing Forward by John Maxwell that I love. And in the book, it talks about the people that are most successful in life are not necessarily the richest, the best looking, the ones that their parents help them. They're the ones that when they fail, they move forward. And for me, um, viewing the beauty in imperfection as perfection, or being imperfectly perfect, as I like to call it, has really been instrumental for me because so much growing up as a young little Latina, I thought I had to be perfect. I thought I was going to be judged all the time. I was very critical of myself. I had some imposter syndrome, and I think it was just because I was putting all that pressure on myself to be perfect. But I saw recently some art by a Japanese artist, and it was a vase that broke, and then they put it together and they made art out of it. And I just think that embracing the fact that it's not perfection but direction has been something that's helped me.
I can go next. So for me, I would say a mindset reframe of looking at my strengths and weaknesses is actually I don't have weaknesses, I have areas of opportunity, right? And looking at things from like that growth mindset, and looking at how I can then be honest with myself about those areas of opportunity. How can I grow in these areas, and be more intentional about how I develop myself, and ensuring that I'm showing up intentionally, not just for myself, my family, those that I lead, those that I serve, but so that in a way that I know that I'm pouring back, and giving back as much as I can, and ensuring that there's always room for how can I, as I grow, how can I ensure that I'm bringing people with me, I'm bringing other Latinas with me through that journey.
It's a push and pull effect. That's what we need to do, you know? That's how we bring others with us. Adriana.
I'm gonna go rogue here. I mean, I love your responses, extremely nice, but I also want to challenge the whole idea of imposter syndrome. I think sometimes we let someone else put that in our head, like someone else's limitations determine what I'm capable of. Absolutely no, 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 para nada. I think I remember one case in which I wanted to do something and someone told me, you're a Latina, you have kids, like you go take a yoga class. I wanted to buy a multi-family business, and he said, "Just relax, go take a yoga class. You're doing too much." And I remember thinking, in that moment, I kind of like felt small, and I believed that. But then I thought about it more, and I'm like, "Who are you to tell me what I need to do? Maybe I'm gonna take a yoga class and buy the multi-family building business." So again, I think sometimes we need to be fierce and brave and just dream big. It doesn't matter what others think we're capable of.
Mhm. I cannot totally, I had something like that happen to me and I'm like, I would never again, never again. But you know what? It's a lesson learned. But I think that ultimately when we, like you said about your book, and this is what I practice and I preach, right? It's to buy yourself confidence, knowing your talents, your gifts, your values and your principles that really makes you unshakable. And people respect that. So yeah, imposter syndrome, no. I think that teaching our kids and our students and the next generation about being so confident in themselves, knowing their self-worth, it's a key denominator here. We have additional questions from the floor. And I mean the floor, meaning the audience. This is for Dr. Lori, this one for Adriana, and one for Lorena. Amazing. I love it. So the first one is for first generation professional, the hidden rules of career advancement can be unclear. What are 2 to 3 unspoken rules people should know to successfully navigate professional spaces?
All right. So I think that it's okay to ask questions. So I think one of the unspoken things would be don't think that, honestly, we always think as I'm first generation, because my dad never went to college. I used to think, oh my gosh, like, and you know how they say no question is a dumb question. But I used to think, oh my God, I'm asking all these questions because I'm first gen. But to be honest with you, in universities, sometimes even non-first gens have the same question. So we and kind of like what Adriana was talking about, like with the imposter syndrome. And thank you so much for eloquently like sharing all of that, because I think sometimes we assume that we're the only ones and other people. So don't be afraid to ask questions. And I'll say the other thing is don't be afraid to ask for help or get a mentor or ask someone to be your mentor. I feel like ever since I realized that, which was during my master's degree, unfortunately, I didn't know even the importance of that. I have mentors all the time, and I try to get all kinds of mentors. So I get mentors that are smarter than me. I get mentors that are where I want to be. I get sometimes mentors of my same ethnicity. Sometimes, honestly, I like to get a white man mentor because if I need to know how they think because I code switch and we could talk about that like later. But I need to like understand, and I need them to understand me and see me as if they were blind, just who I am, not what I look like. And I know I don't have an accent when I speak Spanish. I worked really hard at that, but whether I have an accent a lot, it doesn't take away from my value, and so that would be some of the advice that I would give whoever asked the question.
Thank you. I think that first, because we have mentors that can misguide you and make you feel inferior. So I think that the key is at the same time is to really hone down your values and your principles. So when anyone comes up to you and devalues you, that you cannot be shaken and look at them and smile and say thank you and move on, right? Because I don't believe in disrespecting anyone, but don't disrespect me. So and not closing the bridge. My mom always says keep the bridges open even if you look stupid. So thank you for saying that. No, it's true. Even if you look dumb or whatever the case is, I like it when people misinterpret me. It's okay. For Adriana, you help organizations align culture with performance. What's one clear sign a company's culture is broken? Whoa, this is a good question. And what's the first step to fixing it? Oh,
Oh, great
yeah.
question. This is what I see very often when I start a consulting gig. I ask the executive team, and they will tell me they love it here. Culture here is great. We don't need an engagement survey. This is phenomenal. And then I say, okay, can we see your turnover rate? Even if we don't want to ask anybody how they're feeling, turnover rate is a loud indicator, and people tend to make excuses why employees leave, but it's usually a sign. And the other thing I usually say is, and I give this example because I think it's so practical, if I don't get on the scale and check my weight, it doesn't mean that I'm not going to put on weight. So, not knowing the numbers does not mean that they're good numbers. We need to have awareness. So, my initial recommendation is if you are so sure culture is great, but your employees are telling me, they don't have opportunities for development, they're at the risk of burnout, they don't even feel like they want to go home, or if they're home, they don't want to come to work on Monday. Let's measure, let's see how they're feeling. Let's take one measurement. And then usually they can start seeing, because they always start a business or have a good intent. Like a bad culture, it doesn't mean that leadership has a bad intention. It's just they're not being intentional about how culture evolves as you keep bringing more people and changing the processes. So measure something, because what you measure tends to improve. Thank you.
Oh my God, that's great. Thank you for answering that. And our last question, before we go to the closing question, no, it's for Lorena. As a leadership coach, what is the most common limiting belief you see in high-performing women, and how can they actively work through it? That is a great question. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah, that's a really good question, and something that's incredibly common among the clients that I serve, no matter like their industry or their profession, is and I don't remember who mentioned it. I think it was Adriana mentioned like the amygdala. So a lot of what I have to do kind of towards the beginning is explaining around like our central nervous system and how it is trying to protect us, right? It's the mechanism of survival. And how really just being self-aware of our emotions, and like that's foundational, so that then we're able to be more attuned to ourselves and how important that is, so that then we can get clarity around as we're trying to make some of these like really big important decisions. A lot of my clients are like, I'm stuck, I need clarity, I'm not able to like execute, and these would be even coaches that are my clients. And so with that, it's just, let's get back to some of that foundational work with regards to awareness, with regards to just some of the even like self-limiting beliefs that someone else had talked about earlier, and reminding ourselves of like our value, our worth, and how we already have a voice, how we already are subject matter experts at everything and anything that is us. And for me, it's just about creating that container and that safe space so that my client's own wisdom emerges from within, and helping them just slow down so that they can hear those whispers, so that they can be able to then get and have that clarity that they need to be able to understand and know, okay, here are my next steps. Let's break down like your goals into these manageable, sustainable, realistic, meaningful next steps for you.
Thank you for saying that. The other day, I had a meeting with someone, and I've noticed how my central nervous system just shut down. And I became self-aware. I'm like, whoa, what's happening here? Why am I like this? I'm not like this. And it was something that it was said that kind of triggered. And I said, oh, Fletty, you need to come back from this, no? But it is amazing that you have clients that are also coaches that also go through this. I mean, no one is exempt from feeling or going through their highs and lows, and what really triggers. I think that having the self-awareness level, it's impressive. And I think like you said, once we know and we work on those triggers, right? How can we be able to come out of them? I think that no one knows the perfect answer, but I can tell you what I do. I pray a lot, so that kind of helps me like have that balance mentally, spiritually, and physically. and our reaction. Thank you for sharing that. Wow. I told you it will be a powerful conversation. Now to our last and closing question. Does anyone want to add anything before we go into the closing question? Adriana, Dr. Lori, did you want to add anything?
I honestly, I'm just so grateful to be with Adriana and Lorena. I feel like I'm learning so much. And I mean, what a great point about the central nervous system. So I just honestly want to say thank you for sharing that because I think it's really important. I just learned that there's a thing called somatic therapy. My master's is in counseling, and I think that when we can understand how our mind does impact our body, and like you said very wisely, how you realize when your central nervous system, I think the older I get, my instincts get stronger and just becoming more self-aware of my body and of my thoughts as well as my physical body is important. So thanks for sharing that.
Yeah. If I can just maybe like just really quickly 1 minute, just give a little bit of insight behind like what happens. And so we have like our brain, right? And then we have our amygdala that's somewhere around here. And our amygdala is responsible for like our emotions. And then if this is our prefrontal cortex, this is where we do all of our like executive functioning. And whenever our body is like sensing like, hey, this is danger, danger. Like someone's telling us that they don't like our hair or that we don't belong in this room. Our brain, we flip our lid and our amygdala takes over. And then we can't tap into that prefrontal cortex to make those executive decisions. And so it's so important that like we do breathing, that we ground ourselves, that we're attuned to ourselves so that then we can be able to just slow down, tap back into our prefrontal cortex and make better decisions. But it's something that happens to everyone. And so we want to make sure that we're working with our central nervous system instead of working against our central nervous system.
Thank you for explaining that. I think that's amazing. And by the way, Dr. Lori, I do want to go back to school to become a psychologist. When I was 15 years old, I wanted to become a psychologist. And I didn't know that my mom, a doctor, retired now, also wanted to become a psychologist. So I think it's in the genes. No, thank you for sharing that. And I think that once you hit the fourth decade, that's when everything changes. I feel like you're more self-aware of who you are, what you want, what you're not capable of tolerating, and really understand yourself, your body, your mind and spirit, and what you're able to close down or open up and leave in the past. So I think that being in that age, which I'm sure I'm not going to say any names, but I think that really helps, no? And being self-aware as well. And to bring it back to the last question, looking back on your journeys, what do you feel is the most important legacy you hope to leave for the next generation of women and Latina leaders, and Latina in leadership, sorry?
I have something to share. I think I would love for next generations to not think that we have to overproof or over deliver or accept what is given because it's us. We have potential. There are possibilities. So I think if I could change something, it would have been learning that emotional intelligence sooner. And like Lorena said, right, keeping that lid on, finding out what works for us. Because when we are triggered, we are less intelligent, period. So instead of reacting or being the angry woman in the room or looking like the angry woman in the room, learning at a young age. And I have small children, but I already, like, they know that framework. Your lid is flipped. How can we put it back on? And then I really wish I had learned that sooner. So even though it's not like a poetic desire, I do think that if we learn emotional intelligence sooner, we unlock greater possibilities. And then what does that look like for leadership in women, Latina women? That just unlocks so much potential. Thank you.
That's amazing. Learning that early on really helps have more self-awareness. Thank you so much for that.
I can go next. I would love to leave the next generación of Latinas with you have no ceiling with regards to like what is possible for you. I want them to know that you don't have to make yourself smaller. You don't have to be someone else to lead well. And a big part of the journey is not only like breaking barriers, but it's also like getting out of our own way and trusting and knowing that we belong at those tables. And sometimes you need to make your own table. And so I hope that my legacy shows that through leadership, you can be both strong and then deeply human at the same time. I hope that I can leave behind the doors wide open with stronger pathways, so that the women coming after me can like rise boldly, lead authentically, and be fully themselves.
Amazing. Wepa. How about Dr. Lori?
I'm kind of speechless after both of my colleagues. I'm a little teary-eyed, just very grateful. I guess I reflect on our conversation, and I know that all of us come from a lineage of mujeres luchadora who worked hard. Like we work hard with our hands, with our families and our homes, at work. And, while I think it's important to honor that, I want to leave a legacy where Latinas know that they're worthy even when they're not producing. And, I feel leadership includes the courage to set boundaries, and the wisdom to just prioritize well-being. I know that's like a new like topic of being a thug. You don't have to burn out to be a blessing. And so my final words of wisdom are for the listeners: be the CEO that your mom always wanted you to marry. And be the leader that your younger self needed to see. Because looking back, I don't want people to just remember what what I have achieved. I really want them to remember how I made them feel. Did I empower them? Did I make them feel seen? Did I make them feel capable? Because everyone listening and my beautiful colleagues on this call, we are the fulfillment of our ancestors' wildest dreams, and we can go out there like Bad Bunny and unapologetically make noise.
Wepa, that deserves. Wepa. Thank you so much for those powerful words. And I can't tell you, I grew up in a household, in a safe home, mentally, spiritually, and emotionally. And I thank my parents for their education, for teaching me not to limit myself, right? And not to think anything other than myself. So with that, I did create my own door. I took no for an answer. I knocked until they told me no, and I knocked the other door. So I think that we as Latinas, coming from very strong backgrounds and powerful women and men that really see us, I think it's just easier. But transcending those same values and principles of self-worth and self-confidence is what we're doing here. And Prospanica is doing just that. Bellas Foundation is doing just that. So I want to thank you, each and one of you, for your powerful words, for such insightful feedback, and just to hear at firsthand your professional growth is just impeccable. And thank you. As we honor National Women's History Month, I think what a great way to close out with these incredible Latinas. Thank you. Thank you. I want to express my thanks, Dr. Lori, Maria Huertas, Adriana Bacaro, and Lorena Wade. Thank you so much. I thank you, and I bless you each and one of you in Jesus' name. With that, I'm going to be closing. Thank you to everyone out there for joining us in today's National Women's History Month Bold Woman, Bright Future session that we were able to have today. Your engagement and thoughtful participation made this discussion truly impactful. We are also grateful to Prospanica National for their continued support and leadership in creating spaces that fosters professional growth. We are excited to invite you to our next Entre Amigas webinar on April 18. Focus on financial literacy. Don't miss it. Another chance to learn, connect, and be inspired. So thanks again for being part of today's conversation, and we cannot wait to see you next time. Take care. Good night.